Hello everyone, this is Heath from Mountaineer Motor Tours, and today we're going to be discussing the history of Asheville architectural firm Six Associates. And to do that, we've got to take a broader look at Asheville's architectural and engineering history. And where we're going to pick up our story is really going to be in the late 1800s, after the Civil War has taken quite a toll on the South. Now, this is a re-recording of a presentation that was given for the Preservation Society of Asheville and Buncombe County on Thursday, October 16th, where we discussed this history in detail. So our focus today is primarily going to be on Asheville and Buncombe County, although we will extend to Henderson and Transylvania counties for some of that. But to really keep the focus in check, we're going to stay primarily on Buncombe County, where this firm was most well known. So our story is going to pick up in Asheville in the late 1800s, when we're really more of a Wild West town. And we've got dirt roads and small brick buildings. And the city is primarily known as a stop on what is called the Drover's Route. So this is an early road called the Buncombe Turnpike, where farmers and drovers are bringing livestock to market in areas like South Carolina and Tennessee. So this is an early view of what we now call Pack Square, which was the center square of the city. Now, it's not going to be until 1880 that major train service is going to arrive in Asheville, which is going to dramatically change the scope of people that are coming to visit. So the train will make its way up from Old Fort Mountain into the city. And at this time, Asheville had been primarily a fairly isolated and landlocked area. And then in 1881, we're going to establish an early electric streetcar system, which is going to make mobility around the city tremendously more accessible for people in the city here. So this is going to take place really in what we consider Reconstruction or the Gilded Age. So we're kind of coming out of the area of the Civil War into an age of excess and the Industrial Revolution. So at this time, we're going to see an unofficial triumvirate form between three developers. And these are all men from out of town. So these are going to be Colonel Frank Cox, George Washington Vanderbilt, and Edwin Wiley Grove. And between the three of them, they're going to form basically a gentleman's agreement to not impinge on each other's territory in different parts of Asheville. And so we're going to start with Colonel Frank Cox, who's going to come down to Asheville from Pennsylvania to get into commercial development in downtown Asheville. And his first project is going to be the Battery Park Hotel. And this is going to be a luxury wood frame Victorian era hotel, which he is going to site high on top of Battery Porter Hill, which was formerly a sentry lookout during the Civil War, and it was where all the cannoneers were located to keep a lookout for any invaders from the north. So it's a very scenic and beautifully sited area. And Cox is going to build this beautiful wood frame hotel, which has been designed by an architect from Pennsylvania named Edward Hazelhurst. And it's going to be thoroughly modern in comparison to anything that Asheville has seen previously. So it will be replete with Otis elevators, electric steam heat, and hot running water, where people can come for a nice luxurious stay. Now this is atop the Battery Porter Hotel neighborhood, Battery Park Hotel, and it's going to give you a really good view of the city. And looking down into the center of the city, we're going to see what's going to be mostly residential. So we've got a lot of houses where people are living within close walking distance to the center of town, where trade and commerce is going to occur. And in the foreground of the picture, you're going to see a road running below the hotel, which is basically almost along the location of modern day Interstate I-240 running through town. And the background of the photograph is going to show some of the early roads and homes located in what would later be commercial downtown Asheville. Now, our second developer that's going to be part of this triumvirate is George Washington Vanderbilt, and he's going to come to Asheville with his mother, Maria Louisa, for treatment with a noted Asheville doctor who specializes in virology named Samuel Westray Battle. And it's while she is seeking treatment during the day that George Vanderbilt is going to explore by horseback most of the land. And it's from the view of the Battery Park Hotel that he's going to decide to settle here in Asheville. He thinks, wow, what really an incredible place that he could build his summer home. It's going to be an early chateau. And this is going to be different than most of his other Vanderbilt siblings who are building homes in Newport, Rhode Island or New York City. And so to do that, he's going to need to enlist a crack team, because as he is acquiring land, which is going to one day total about 125,000 acres, he's going to need a group of technicians, designers, and architects that can build this grand estate for him. And the land is not in particularly good shape. It's land that has been heavily logged for timber and also has been heavily farmed with poor farming practices and needs a lot of restoration. So as far as designing the house, he's got this grand chateau in mind. He's going to enlist the help of architect Richard Morris Hunt, who is a student of the École des Beaux-Arts in Paris, France, and specializes in the Beaux-Arts design style, which he's done for Vanderbilt's siblings in Newport, Rhode Island, and New York City. Now, Hunt is going to enlist the help of architect Richard Sharp Smith as his associate architect, and architect and ceramicist Raphael Guastavino, who will do much of the ceramic work and tile vaulting inside of the home. Now, to get the land in check, he's going to hire landscape architect and city planner Frederick Law Olmsted, who has traveled through western North Carolina prior to the Civil War, is very familiar with the area, and when he sees the land, he's somewhat disappointed. He's dismayed by the condition that it's in, and he knows it's going to take a lot of work to get it back into health. But he comes up with an idea of not only building a sustainable forestry practice later on, but also what would be called an arboretum, outdoor living tree and plant museum. Now, to repopulate this land, they know they're going to need to establish their own nursery because there's no nursery in the country that can provide the quantity of trees, flowers, and shrubs they're going to need to repopulate this land. So Olmsted hires a Canadian botanist named Chauncey Beadle. He's also going to look for somebody with experience in forestry, and that is going to come in the form of Gifford Pinchot. And Olmsted had done design for Pinchot's family in Pennsylvania at their Greystone Manor. Now, Pinchot has studied in France at the École des Forestry to learn sustainable forestry practices, and this group of men is going to get to work to produce what we now know as the modern Biltmore estate. In addition to the home, they're also going to add George Vanderbilt's vision of a quaint English village that will be known as Biltmore Village, formerly in the town of Best, which was named for the Best Railroad Company. And this is full of rental property, both commercial and residential, which will provide an income stream to George Vanderbilt. Now, to take care of a lot of the engineering needs, this is going to be a very modern house in every way. So it also is going to have running water, heat, an elevator inside. They need an engineer, and that is going to come in the form of an Asheville local named Charles Waddell. Now, Charles Waddell was born in Hillsborough, North Carolina in 1877, and his family would move to Asheville when he is a young man, and he's going to matriculate through the Asheville City School System and later the Bingham Military Academy, which was here in Asheville. And it was while he was a student at the Orange Street School over off of Charlotte Street that he is going to attract the attention of one of his teachers, who was named Mr. Webb. And Mr. Webb recognizes what is basically what he considers a boy genius in the form of Charles Waddell. This is somebody who is much advanced for his age in his studies. And at the time, Asheville was looking for a new superintendent of their fire alarm system and someone that could set up a call box system throughout the city. And this is going to come in the form of Charles Waddell. So at age 14, he's going to set up Asheville's first fire alarm system and become the superintendent of that in 1891. And this is going to be a system that employs these small game well call boxes all over the city, which goes to a central routing room pictured at the right that will give the location of a fire emergency happening in Asheville. Now, he's going to later become the chief electrician and engineer at the Biltmore estate in 1901 after studying up north in several different engineering firms. He's going to form his own engineering practice in 1902, and he will become involved in developing much of Asheville's new infrastructure. So we're talking about developing a modern water system, electric power plants that are going to be primarily hydroelectric, generating power off of the French Broad and Swannanoa rivers, as well as bridges to connect different parts of town. Now, he's going to later be awarded an honorary degree of engineering from NC State. Now, his first project is going to be a large bridge, which we now know as the McDowell Street Viaduct, which was crumbling and falling apart. And it's going to be his firm that actually gets it back and restores its structural integrity. and that's going to become an important part of connecting downtown to Biltmore Village. Now, he also engineers a bridge on Biltmore Avenue, which is going to cross the Swannanoa, and this was only one of two bridges to survive the tremendous damage of the flood of 1916. So at the top of the photo, the bridge was completely submerged, and then later they pulled all of the dirt and debris off of it, and the bottom photo is going to be when all of that mud and dirt has been washed off, and it still was completely structurally intact. The reason it survived was because of this design of quadrifoil, which is cast into the concrete, and that allowed openings for water to pass through so that the bridge would not become damaged. That bridge is still there today. It has been restored and only contains one quadrifoil at each end, paying homage to Waddell's original design. Now, our next land developer that's going to again come from up north is a guy named George Pack, and he's going to arrive in Asheville in 1884 for respiratory treatment as well. And it's while he's here that he will spread his riches around, and he says, hey, I think one thing that we need to think about is creating a beautiful center of town, a modern plaza. So he helps fund Pack Square. He's also going to give the funding for the Vance Monument, which is pictured in the center, and this is a granite obelisk, which was designed by associate architect at Biltmore Estate, Richard Sharp Smith. And he's also going to fund the modern Pack Library, which is the building with the crenellated detail at the top. So the building in the center is our Buncombe County Courthouse, and behind it is the modern City Hall. And that building was going to be built in 1884 and would house the first official fire department, which was also formed in that year. So you can see this is some of the early images of early motorized fire equipment. Asheville would be known as early as 1906 as having the first motorized fire trucks in the state. Now, in addition to all these developers and engineers, Asheville was also attracting architects from out of state. And one of these architects that was going to come down to Asheville was a gentleman named William Lord, and he is going to move to Asheville from Syracuse, New York in 1899. And he was said to come down for a potential partnership with Richard Sharp Smith, which didn't come through. And so he decided at that point he was going to establish his own practice. And one of his first commissions he did in Asheville was his own home on what is now Flint Street in the Montford neighborhood. So this house was started building in 1899 and was completed in 1900. And this is William's only son in the front yard, Anthony, and his dog in the front yard of their house on Flint Street. And again, this is William Lord and his 2-year-old son, Anthony Lord. And the view behind them is what would be modern day Broadway. So this is looking out from the rear of that house on Flint Street. And William Lord is also going to establish his own office on Church Street, located at 17.5 Church Street in this small brick building, which is now connected to First Bank on Church Street. Now, some of the commercial projects he did in Asheville, he was really prolific through Asheville and Buncombe County and even beyond. But some of the buildings that still exist that we're going to cover just very briefly are the Christian Science Church on South French Broad in Asheville, which was built in 1912. He was the supervising architect under architect Bertram Goodhue for Trinity Episcopal Church, which was completed in 1913, again on Church Street. The David Millard High School, which was on College Street and was demolished in the late 60s, early 70s to create the One Oak Plaza office park that is there currently. And Biltmore High School, which was completed in 1926. The building does still exist off of Hendersonville Road. Now, he also collaborated with Charles Waddell on the power plant for the Asheville Normal Institute, which was a junior college at the time. And this wouldn't be the first time that they would collaborate on several different projects. Now, another developer that we have that is going to come to Asheville that is going to develop part of town that we now know as North Asheville is Edwin Wiley Grove. So we've primarily been talking about developers and architects in downtown Asheville and the Montford neighborhood, as well as South Asheville and the town of Biltmore. But we need to talk about developing what we know as a modern suburb or neighborhood in North Asheville. Now, Edwin Wiley Grove is a pharmaceutical magnate who is going to come to Asheville from St. Louis, Missouri, and he also comes up here for respiratory treatment as early as 1897. Now, Grove has terrible bronchitis, which is aggravated by the air down in St. Louis, where he is producing his pharmaceutical tonic, which is called Grove's Tasteless Chill Tonic. And this is a tonic that contains quinine and is found to be an effective treatment against the symptoms of malaria, as well as a preventative of malarial disease. And so he has made this great fortune down here with his company, the Paris Medicine Company. And he's moved to St. Louis from Paris, Tennessee, which is the origin of the name of the Paris Medicine Company, where he got his start as a pharmacist. And it's while there, he's moved there to have access to a great railroad network and industrial neighborhood, but this pollution tremendously aggravates his bronchitis, which leads to weeks of unending hiccups. And so his doctor suggests, like many others, that he travel to Asheville. And so he quietly begins acquiring property in Asheville, and this wouldn't be the first development he's done. He's got two different developments in Atlanta, Georgia, one that is called Atkins Park, and another named Grove Park, so similar to Asheville. And so the first project he builds is a real estate office, which is designed by an Asheville architect named Albert Heath Carrier, which is on Charlotte Street in the left of the photograph, and the Grove Park, which is named for his second wife, Gertrude, so they call it Gertrude Place, which is built in 1904. And it will become a stop on that electric streetcar line with these two huts adjoining either side of entrances to the park. So he's going to continue buying about 300 acres of land in that neighborhood, which is known as the Kimberly Lands, who were named for a gentleman named Dr. Kimberly and the Kimberly family, who was a displaced professor from the University of Chapel Hill, who came here when the university closed after the Civil War broke out. And he quietly became more of a gentleman farmer in that area. And Grove is going to buy about 300 acres that would make up the Grove Park neighborhood from Dr. Kimberly. So those were formerly the Kimberly Lands. Now, Grove also is going to need a team of architects and professionals that can help him develop this neighborhood. And this would come in the form of his son-in-law, Fred Seeley, who was a trained chemist and pharmacist who actually met Grove working in the chemistry industry and married his only daughter, Evelyn Grove. And together they would build somewhat of a real estate fortune and dynasty. He's also going to employ Richard Sharp Smith from Biltmore Estate and another architect named Charles Parker. Now it's going to be his son-in-law, Fred Seeley, that is going to help him design his idea of a luxury resort. So Grove is set about developing and subdividing these lots in the Grove Park neighborhood to sell beautiful luxury summer homes to wealthy industrialists who are coming to stay in Asheville and enjoy the mild climate and air for their respiratory issues. And he is approached at some point by the Asheville City Council that says, we believe if you build a beautiful fireproof inn, that it will increase tourism in Asheville and help you sell more lots in your neighborhood. And Grove likes this idea, and he sets about trying to find the perfect architect. In his head, he's got the vision of a Yosemite Lodge, something with this rustic mountain feel to it. And he's approached by many architects around the country, one of them being Richard Sharp Smith. But he doesn't really like any of their designs, and he becomes overwhelmed with the project until his son-in-law, Fred Seeley, catches wind of it. And he decides that he will pen a design, and he passes it across Grove's desk. And this is the design that Grove ultimately likes, and he sets Seeley about on this project, building the inn in 1912. And Seeley has a goal of reaching the tourist season of the summer of 1913. So he puts together this plan and puts together a crew of 500 people to build this luxurious inn, working 6 days a week, 24 hours a day, until it is opened in the summer of 1913. And is going to be built from granite rocks quarried from Sunset Mountain above, which did have a granite rock quarry, which was also conveyed in the sale to Grove. So not only did he buy 310 acres of the Kimberly Lands, he also bought 330 acres of land on top of Sunset Mountain. Now, Seeley, in addition to designing the Grove Park Inn, is also going to design his own personal residence, which is called Overlook Castle. And it is meant to be reminiscent of a 16th century castle that would be known as Ford Abbey. He's also going to design a series of English cottage-style buildings for a business that he will pioneer called Biltmore Industries. Now, Biltmore Industries was a business that he purchased from Edith Vanderbilt in 1917 that was weaving homespun woven wool fabric in producing small wood-carved items. So he will design these English cottage-style buildings, which are located on a 12-acre tract behind the Grove Park Inn. And this will serve as an additional attraction for the Grove Park Inn. Now, he did this in conjunction with an architect and engineer named Gross Walton McKibben from Atlanta, Georgia. Now, at the time all this development is going on, the city starts to get a little bit jealous and they want in on it. And they've got to have really a harmony of vision to help align all these developers, architects, and engineers, and a master plan for how the city is going to move forward with all this development and building boom. And the person that's going to really embody that principle the most is going to be our mayor, John Hannibal Cathy, who will be elected in 1923, and he's going to come on the heels of a mayor named Gallatin Roberts, who has started some of this city planning with a city planner and design and landscape architect named John Nolan. So Cathy's going to catch wind of what they're going to do for this city master plan. We need to improve our road system. We need to improve our sewer and electrical system. We need a new landfill. And our population is exploding dramatically. So at the outbreak of the decade, we've got a population of about 25,000 people in 1920. So this city planner, John Nolan, who's come to Asheville, has been recruited here by George Stevens, who is the vice president of the Asheville Citizen-Times. And Nolan has been a student under Frederick Law Olmsted Jr. at Carnegie Mellon, and his firm is based in Cambridge, Massachusetts. So when he comes down here, he's going to bring a team from his office that's going to study demographics of the city, our major industries, and evaluate current infrastructure. So roads, sewer systems, electrical, water supply, road network. And he creates a 72-page plan in 1922, which is going to go through a couple different evolutions and would be voted on by our population in 1925. Now, in addition to that, with our population growing, we also need more city staff. And so he's going to recommend designing a new city-county plaza, county courthouse, and city hall. Now, in addition to doing this City of Asheville master plan, John Nolan is also going to design the Lakeview Park neighborhood, which centers around a man-made lake called Beaver Lake, as well as the Grove Park neighborhood. So you're going to see some design similarities if you travel through these neighborhoods, as well as the City of Asheville, and Nolan's influence under Frederick Law Olmsted. Now, Nolan had come down to Asheville to view a lot of Olmsted's work at Biltmore Estate, so he was quite familiar with the area and loved it. So as again, I mentioned, he contributed to the Lakeview Park neighborhood, which has beautiful manicured neighborhood streets with lots of nature. Now, as we approach downtown Asheville, we're going to need some architects to help us carry out this master plan of Nolan. So he's going to help with some new design in Asheville. And the architect that the city is going to really fall for is a guy named Douglas Ellington. Now, Ellington is a native of Clayton, North Carolina, which is a small town outside of Raleigh. And he is a graduate also of the École des Beaux-Arts, similar to Richard Morris Hunt. So he is going to get his first architectural commission with the design of First Baptist Church here in Asheville. So he's going to come down in 1925 to meet with the building committee of the church, who is going to fall in love with his design, which is said to be reminiscent of the Cathedral dei San Fiori in Florence, Italy, otherwise known as the Duomo, for this dramatic domed rooftop and cupola. And then he will secure that commission in late 1925. They will continue constructing the church in 1926, which will be unveiled in the spring of 1927. And Mayor Cathy is really interested in the design of this church, so he commissions Ellington to design and carry out the plan for Nolan's City-County Plaza, what he would refer to as the Civic Center. And so Ellington drafts a design of an Art Deco City Hall on the right, which we recognize as the building we know today, and a contrasting county courthouse on the left, connected by what they call an Art Deco arcade, which will serve as the city's bus terminal in the center of the two buildings. Now, the county isn't quite so sure about that. They're a little skeptical about the cost, which Cathy is quoted at $500,000 for City Hall. And so they decide to appoint their own building committee, which is going to be made up of members of the Chamber of Commerce, which is composed of several businessmen and one architect, William Lord. And this group is going to suggest that they actually create twin buildings. So they would have both identical city hall and county courthouses, but still connected with this Art Deco arcade, which would serve as the bus terminal between both buildings. Now, this makes Kathy rather unhappy. He doesn't really like the design, and he says, "Look, I wanted to have that contrasting design, but he's willing to compromise." And so both the city and the county come upon an agreement. They say, "Okay, well, we can agree on having the twin buildings." Now, the city residents are a little bit uncertain about this, and so this draws the attention of a political cartoonist who comes up with this design of the big upset crying city building baby, which at that time the cost has again increased to about $250,000, then $800,000. And under the scrutinous eye of this Chamber of Commerce committee and this old woman coming out of the city hall offices with this rolling pin saying, "Hey, you let my twin alone." She's not so certain about the scrutiny of these two twin buildings. Now, ultimately, this whole agreement is going to fall apart about a week later. So they've come upon an agreement in August of 1926 with the county commission and Mayor Cathy. Now, this throws Mayor Cathy into a furious tirade, and he says, "These people in the county commission and this group of people from the Chamber of Commerce are a bunch of damn jackasses, kickers, and soreheads. And I believe we need to get these buildings built, even if it means I lose every friend in Asheville and I forfeit the opportunity for any new friends. Not only that, if I have to bury the foundation all the way to the gates of hell, I'll do it." Now, this doesn't make everybody in the city of Asheville so happy, and it's published as a quoted editorial in the paper. Now, the county is ultimately going to go their own way and hire an architectural firm called Milburn and Heister, which is going to design that courthouse, and they already specialize in municipal courthouses. Now, Ellington's also going to go on to design a number of iconic buildings in Asheville. One of these is Asheville High School on McDowell Street. He's going to design a new fire station on Merriman Avenue, an extension to the Clarence Barker Memorial Hospital in Biltmore Village, and many more. So those are some of his biggest commissions. We're also going to see several buildings from architect Ronald Green, who is going to design a building for a developer named Linwood Baldwin Jackson. And this is a beautiful Gothic revival skyscraper and is said to be one of the first skyscrapers in western North Carolina. And it's going to take up a fairly small tract of land, and it is connected to the Westall building. And both of these buildings are going to share an elevator. He's also going to design our new city market, fire station, and police station, which is going to be constructed by one of the city's first African-American masons, James Vester Miller. Now, at the same time that all this work is going on downtown, we're also starting to see development spread to South Asheville. And this is going to come in the form of a new high-wealth neighborhood, which is going to be developed by Edith Vanderbilt as another income stream for the estate, called Biltmore Forest, starting in 1923. Now, one of the architects that's going to make his way south at this emerging time is a gentleman named Earl Stillwell. Now, Stillwell was born in Hannibal, Mississippi, and he's going to move to Asheville in 1907. And he's had a number of various educations, so he's attended the United States Naval Academy, University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, Cornell, and he's even traveled extensively through Europe, where he's gotten exposure to a lot of buildings. He's going to settle in Henderson County, and most of the work he's going to do in Henderson County in Transylvania is both residential and commercial. So to highlight just a couple of his buildings in the earlier part of his career, he's done Hendersonville High School, which still exists. He's done the Hendersonville City Hall, his own personal residence, the Stillwell House, and St. James Episcopal Church. And again, this is just to name only a few of his architectural commissions. Now, at the end of World War I, we're going to have a lot of soldiers and craftspeople coming to Asheville to be convalesced and receive treatment at the Otine Veterans Hospital. And one of the noteworthy architects or craftsmen of this period to come travel there is William Waldo Dodge Jr. Now, Dodge was born in Washington, D.C. in 1895, and he attended the Phillips Exeter Preparatory School, Princeton, and later MIT, where he earned his degree in architecture in 1916. Now, he served valiantly in the infantry during World War I, where he received shrapnel wounds as well as some respiratory illness due to chlorine gas. And he would end up at the Otine Veterans Hospital. And one of the things that was fairly ahead of its time for the Otine Veterans Hospital was employing the use of occupational craft therapy. For many of these soldiers that were stuck in bed or were waiting around all day for treatment, this was something to kind of keep their hands busy. So they would learn things like silvercraft, leatherworking, small metal craft, and other various forms of crafts. Now, one of the teachers at the Otine Veterans Hospital that was teaching this was Margaret Wheeler Robinson, and she would teach Dodge how to do hammered silvercraft. And she had learned this at the Gaylord Sanitarium and traveled down to Asheville. Now, Dodge is going to ultimately marry Wheeler Robinson, and as he gets out of the hospital, he's going to be hired as a teacher of physics and mechanical drawing at Asheville School for Boys. Now, unfortunately, he's got a reoccurrence of this respiratory illness due to his injuries during World War I, and he's going to need to travel for more advanced treatment. So he and Margaret traveled to Wallingford, Connecticut to the Gaylord Sanitarium in 1921. And it's while at Gaylord that they're going to found a small company called Gaylord Silvercraft, which is going to be in operation from 1922 to 23. Now, Dodge really loves Asheville, so he moves back to Asheville in 1924 and forms his own company, Hand Wrought Silver. And he's going to rent a small cottage at the end of Charlotte Street, number 412, which today would be where the golf course is. The house no longer exists. And he's going to be producing these small items of silvercraft. And just to highlight a very small portion of his work, he's making trophies, plates, bowls, cocktail sets, and he's using what is known as this beautiful waterfall hammer technique, which is visible on this bowl and this small dish. Now, he wants to get back into architect, and one of his first architectural commissions is the Hammond Knowlton House, which is going to be designed for an industrialist named Charles Hammond, who is the heir to a large silk producing company, the Hammond Silk Company. And he wants to design this beautiful Tudor house as his winter home here in Asheville. And this is going to be situated in the Grove Park neighborhood, which has really taken off at this time in the early 1920s. So Dodge designed this house and has it reviewed by Grove's primary architect, Charles Parker. And it is replete with these beautiful wood carvings in a lot of the beams, as well as metal lanterns, both inside and outside of the home, which are constructed by Dodge. So we can see some more of Dodge's carvings below the windows here. And this really proves Dodge's multi-talented capability. He's also going to design the William Knight House in Biltmore Forest, which again is also blossoming during the 1920s with many wealthy residents coming to Asheville. And Dodge both does the exterior and interior design of this home. Now, during the late 20s, he's going to move his silvercraft shop and architectural design practice from Charlotte Street to Biltmore Forest. And he's going to design the Dodge Silver Shop, which is going to be featuring these old world craftsman design elements. And these are some of the men working for him inside of this silver shop. He's also going to design the artisan shop, which sadly no longer exists. The old silver shop is still in existence next to the Biltmore Forest Town Hall. So again, this artisan shop is going to feature some of his metalwork and hinges on the door, the lantern, and these beautiful carvings on the outside of the building. Now, Grove is not really, we're going to kind of shift our story back to Edwin Wiley Grove, who's not really satisfied with building in just North Asheville. So he's going to start shifting into commercial real estate development on what is now Haywood Street in downtown Asheville. And one of his first projects is the construction of the Bon Marché department store for local businessman Louis Lipinski. And above the hill we can see, so this is construction of Bon Marché on Haywood Street, with the Miles building next door and the old Battery Park Hotel high on the hill above this. And so in its finished form, Bon Marché is going to look like this, and it is attached to the Haywood building, another Grove project which features several automobile dealerships on the lower level and offices on the upper floor. Now you can see Haywood Street as it's continuing Grove's development. So we've got the George Vanderbilt Hotel directly in front of us, the tall building with the two cupolas and beautiful rooftop deck. We've also got the Castagna building kind of down in the middle portion of the screen, And we can see some of the last residences on this street kind of in the foreground of the photograph, where we have it labeled as Haywood Street. So those would later be demolished. This is where a lot of people were living at this time. So Grove is continuing to build all of these different buildings on the street. Now he's got his sights set on one crown jewel, and that is the original Battery Park Hotel. And Grove is building up this pretty big portfolio of hotels in the area. So he not only has his famous Grove Park Inn, but he wants more. And so he's able to buy the Battery Park Hotel from the Cox family, which still has tremendous real estate holdings in downtown Asheville. And he's going to have a fire mysteriously break out at the hotel, which is going to necessitate the demolition of the hotel. Now, following Nolan's plan, John Nolan, in addition to looking over the landscape of downtown Asheville, says, I think this area could be better used and could be leveled out to create more development. So Grove begins demolishing that original Battery Park Hotel, and not only the hotel, but he begins demolishing the entire hill that it sat upon. And this is very dangerous, grueling work that is being done with blasting dynamite, which does take the lives of several men who are working on it, as well as one of the city's first steam shovels. So a lot of that dirt is being excavated by steam shovel and hauled out by mule cart. So this is a dramatic change to what we call the built environment of downtown Asheville. So we can see he was demolishing all that land and the original building for what would become the new Battery Park Hotel, a high-rise hotel on the back side of that property. Now, another hotel he's going to purchase is the Margot Terrace Hotel, which is another wood frame hotel that he is going to demolish. And he is going to level this out as much as he can to create an area for his newest development, which is going to be the Grove Arcade, the city's first indoor shopping mall. And he has this designed by architect Charles Parker. And coming from the center of that building is going to be a 13-story tower, which he envisions for more office space and perhaps even apartments. Now, the design continues to evolve a little bit, even with a connection to the Battery Park Hotel, so that people are staying there for conventions can go between both buildings without having to walk outside. Now, Grove is going to die in 1927, supposedly from eating a bad tin of oysters, and the construction is going to be sold to another developer here in Asheville named W.P. Taylor. And he's going to complete the construction of the Grove Arcade, which is replete with terracotta detailing on the outside. But he's not going to have the funding to build that tower coming from the center of the building. And it's going to be completed in 1929, just before the stock market crash, which is ultimately going to hurt its opening. Now, all of that dirt had to go somewhere, right? I mean, we're talking about thousands of cubic yards of dirt. So Grove is going to haul that down to a really rough and ravenous area that will now be known as Cox Avenue. So this is an area known as Buxton Hill, and it was home to several different schools, being the Ravenscroft Academy for Boys and Reverend Jarvis Buxton's North State Fitting School, of which author Thomas Wolfe was a student. So this was a fairly remote area. Grove develops it into the city's first motor mile, starting in about 1924, subdivides this recently developed and leveled out land to sell lots to become car dealers and service places. So this would be where all the new car sales, machine shops, and repair shops are going to be located in the city. So at this point, between Grove, Vanderbilt, and Cox, we've kind of formed a framework of design. We've made areas of containment. So these would be suburbs of Grove Park, Biltmore Forest, Biltmore Village, further south into South Asheville, Grove Park, and we've made an area where we can start designing and building more properties. So at this time, we also have some younger architects that are watching the city that they've been born in change dramatically. So most of these architects we're going to highlight were born right around 1900. And one of these is an architect named Anthony Lord. Now, Anthony Lord is the son of William Lord, who we've talked about some of his architecture. And Anthony was born here in 1900, and he's going to grow up in the house his father designed on Flint Street and matriculate through public schools of Asheville. He's going to graduate from Asheville High School, and he's going to enroll in the Georgia Institute of Technology, and he'll graduate with a degree in mechanical engineering in 1922. So this is Tony and his father right here at their house. Now, Tony's going to have really an idyllic childhood growing up in Asheville. He's a very curious young man with a lot of mechanical aptitude, which is going to give him a lot of ability to pursue different crafts and hobby. Now, after he graduates from Georgia Institute of Technology, which we know as Georgia Tech today, he's going to briefly work as a draftsman in the offices of Charles Waddell. But he finds the work a little bit too regimented for him, and he'd like to do something a little bit more artistic. So his mother is going to send him to the New York Arts Academy for a couple of summers, and then he's going to go on to earn a Bachelor of Fine Arts in Architecture from Yale University in 1927. Now, in late 1927, after his graduation, he's going to embark on a trip to Europe with several friends of his, where he's going to photograph, sketch, and paint architecture, people, and landscapes that he sees all over Europe. And they're going to travel through England, France, Italy, and North Africa. Now, this trip is chronicled in a wonderful book by author Elizabeth Kostova called 1927. The Good-Natured Chronicle of a Journey, if you'd like to read more about that trip in detail. Now, while he's there, he's going to take these beautiful watercolors and sketches of many buildings in Europe that are not going to exist after World War II. So what Anthony is going to see growing up in Asheville as well as in Europe is going to give him an incredibly unique experience, which is something that will not be equaled by peers of his or descendants in later Asheville history. Now, when Lord returns to Asheville, he's going to join his father's architectural practice, which is going to be changed to the name of Lord and Lord. One of their first projects they're going to design together is the Edie Latta Nurses Dormitory. And this is a Georgian-style dormitory designed for nurses of Mission Hospital, which would be right across the street from that building. Now, today it is known as the Interchange Building off of Charlotte Street and the entrance ramp to I-240. And it is owned by Buncombe County, where it is used for their election and IT services. Now, Lord and Lord are also going to design the new sanctuary for St. Mark's Lutheran Church, where our presentation was held on October 16th. Now, we also believe that Anthony did a lot of the ironwork for lanterns outside of the church, which at the time of its construction, he was running his own iron foundry company called Flint Architectural Forgings, in the back of their house at 267 Flint Street. Now, both of the Lords were incredibly influential in the North Carolina American Institute of Architects chapter. So William Lord is going to be one of the founding members of the NCAIA chapter and would be one of the first determinants of licensure for the state. So both Anthony and William were the only father and son combination to receive fellowship status, which is one of the most renowned and award statuses that can be awarded in the AIA. Anthony Lord would later go on to be president of NCAIA and very involved in their board for many years to come. Now, another one of the architects who want to talk about this up and coming at this time is a young man named Henry Gaines. Now, Henry Gaines was born in Central South Carolina in 1904, and he would attend Clemson School of Architecture and graduate with a Bachelor of Science in Architecture in 1922. Now, he worked as a while for a draftsman for Serene and Company down in Greenville, and later for Beecham LeGrand, who would be known for designing several big projects in Greenville and Asheville. One of these is the Self-Help Building, where Gaines would later have an office. Now, he and his wife were watching many of these developers come to Asheville, and at this time in the early 20s, we were having this large development boom of real estate developers coming from Central Florida. And it was thought that Western North Carolina would become the next Miami with the construction of all these wonderful resorts and the increase in tourism trade. So Gaines, he has to make a decision if he's going to go down to Miami or Asheville. And ultimately, he and his wife pack up their little jalopy and make their way up to the mountains of Asheville in 1925. And he's going to get a small office down on Market Street. So he will later establish his own private practice in 1925. And it's while he's at his own practice that he is approached by the Buchholz Construction Company, who also shares an office in his building. And they say, hey, we have this large project that we're being contracted for out in Hendersonville in the neighborhood of Laurel Park on the top of Jump Off Mountain. And this is going to be the Fleetwood Hotel. Now, this is going to be commissioned by a Florida developer named J. Perry Stultz. and he has done many large projects down in Miami, and he hosts this large gathering for the public talking about this hotel on the top of Jump Off Mountain. And he plans to have this big barbecue lunch, a brass band, and attract a lot of attention for this development. Now, this is going to be sited at the top of Jump Off Mountain, where Stoltz has purchased 101 acres. And he's trying to do has a similar idea to the Battery Park Hotel, this grand luxury hotel at the top of a mountain. So they get pretty far into the project with Gaines working alongside of the Buchholz Construction Company, and this is his biggest construction project. He's just kind of done some minor residential projects prior to this, but is not making a lot of money. And as soon as they get fairly through the project, the checks stop coming. And so they write to Stoltz and they say, hey, we're behind on payroll. And he says, oh, I'm sorry, my controller is sick. Don't worry, it's on its way. And again, they have delays and difficulty in obtaining payment. So the Buchholz Construction Company, unbeknownst to Gaines, starts taking out loans so they can keep funding payroll. And eventually the project kind of grinds to a halt. They've gone as far as building the steel substructure for it. They've constructed up to the 12th floor. They've had furnaces delivered, $10,000 worth of bathtubs, and all kinds of door hardware, and everything has stopped. And so Gaines has to go find other employment. And the hotel is going to sit like this until the early 30s when it is demolished, and the steel would be later used towards the war effort. Now, one of the old wives' tales in Henderson County is that there were many homes with F&H stamped on doorknobs around the city, and many bathtubs had been stolen from this incredible hotel. Now, another young architect that's going to be coming up in this time is a gentleman named Stuart Rogers, and his family is going to come to Asheville from Wilmington in 1906, and he's going to attend Asheville Public Schools. He's gotten a degree in business administration from Duke University in 1928, graduating Phi Beta Kappa, and then he's going to get a master's in architecture from Harvard University. In addition to that, he's also a talented tennis player and athlete. And it's while he's at Harvard that he's going to create many different architectural projects. And we were lucky enough to come across several of these early architectural drawings. So these are some projects he did while he was in Harvard of both classical and modern design. And these would be done on charcoal sketches as well as pastels. So he's going to come to Asheville and have a little bit of a difficulty finding a job as the Depression starts to take its rampage of Asheville. Now, one of the things that Mayor Cathy did was publish this large group, a large publication that would kind of give a summary of all of his accomplishments as he was leaving office. And Cathy was being forced to leave office. People were very upset about the amount of money he had spent and his tirades in the newspaper. And so he published a summary of achievement called 1927, My Time in Office. During this time, now this is just to give you an idea of how rapid the development was going on in Asheville in about a 5 to 6 year span. So starting in 1923, there were over 40 miles of streets paved with 500,000 square yards of hard surfaces, 44 miles of water mains laid, and 30 miles of sanitary sewer line. The city created many different forms of entertainment, from a city zoo and recreation park, McCormick Field Memorial Stadium, and a municipal golf course, 7 different schools, and racked up a tab of gross bond debt. So this is governmental bonds, which are being funneled primarily through one bank, which is the Central Bank and Trust, of almost $17 million by April 1927. So this would be about $1/3 billion in today's dollars. And that's not even including the county debt. So in 1927, we have a brief real estate crash. So again, you remember we talk about Grove passed away in 1927, and there's a terrible, devastating hurricane which affects Florida during the fall of 1926. And this destroys many developments as well as the funding sources for people that are developing Asheville. And basically the bottom is going to fall out of Asheville during this period, and most of the real estate is going to become worthless. So we talked about John Cathy. He's going to be run out of office, and the incumbent mayor from that time, Gallatin Roberts, is going to return to office in 1927. Now things are only going to kind of get worse from there. Roberts rather than kind of trying to develop a plan of more sustainable funding for the city and paying off all this debt, doctors the financial statements, hoping that the market will catch up. But it doesn't. And so things kind of continue to get bad to worse. And so we have the stock market crash in October of 1929. And a year later, the bank that is holding all that debt, the Central Bank and Trust, fails on November 30th, 1930, never to reopen again, along with 8 other banks. And this leaves many people in Asheville penniless and many properties worthless. So Gallatin Roberts ends up being indicted for financial fraud, along with several other employees of the Central Bank and Trust, some of whom are in prison. And Gallatin Roberts ends up taking his own life, shooting himself in the head in the legal building, leaving behind a note to the citizens of Asheville. So we're in a fairly dark place at this point in time, and we've got to decide what we're going to do about the debt. So the city and the county confer, and they decide to consolidate their debt, which amounts to about $158.8 million, which would be equivalent to around $2.8 billion in today's money. And this is going to take us another 45 years to pay off. So we're going to restructure that bond debt rather than declaring bankruptcy. And we're fairly unique among cities in that we don't declare bankruptcy. We do decide to pay it off. So it's going to take until 1978 for the last bond of debt accrued during this period to be paid off. So when the Depression breaks out, this is going to lead to a difficult time in Asheville for all these architects and engineers when there are no more building projects. So in our next presentation, which is going to be Thursday, November 13th at 5:30 p.m. in Warren Wilson Presbyterian Church's sanctuary, we're going to talk about Asheville as these architects and engineers had to pivot during the Great Depression. So our focus will primarily be on Anthony Lord, Henry Gaines, and Stuart Rogers as they take on new careers outside of architecture until this business picks up back again during World War II. Now we're going to really get deep into the heart of this firm, this architectural firm that they're going to form called Six Associates, which is going to be involved and formed by Stuart Rogers, the founder, Anthony Lord, Henry Gaines, Bill Dodge, Earl Stillwell, and Charles Waddell. And we're going to get into how the post-World War II economy dramatically shaped Asheville's development into the city we know today. So in this presentation, we've covered the prequel and kind of the origins of this firm and how the city evolved, and we created this framework. And then the second half, we're going to talk about how that framework was used to create a more modern architecture as people needed new homes, churches, businesses for buildings, a modern airport, hospitals, military bases, and much more. So hopefully you guys will join us at that presentation next time. Now, thanks for attending. My name is Heath Towson of a company called Mountaineer Motor Tours, where we not only do historical talks, we write about Asheville history, and we give tours of Asheville in an antique automobile, which is a 1923 Ford Model T. Thanks so much for joining, and I hope to see y'all at the next presentation. Thank you.